before you all came in this morning, I wandered around I guess this is cafeteria, and I noticed all your little sayings along the wall, I believe this, I believe that. One that really caught my attention was, I believe it's taking me a long time to become the person I want to be. And I have a variation of that one because I still haven't figured out exactly the person I want to be, but I believe I'm becoming that person. Another thing I believe in, though, is that each and every one of you here today has the capacity and the ability in you to make a huge difference in the world. Every time I speak, there seems to be mic issues, but I did a TEDx talk earlier in the year, the mic didn't work, so yeah. I believe also that things don't happen for just no reason. There's a reason for everything that happens. So I'm going to tell you my personal journey, and there's some things that happened in my life which really weren't the most pleasant things. But they happen for a reason, and I think part of that reason is so that I would have a better understanding of what a lot of people go through, and I'm now in a position where I can help people deal with the issues that they face every day. So I'm going to take you way back to my earliest childhood memory. How many of you have a great earliest childhood memory? Very cool. Well, my earliest childhood memory wasn't the greatest one. I was under 5, I don't know exactly how old I was, but I know I was younger than 5, and I was lying in my bed. It was a summer evening, and the cars passing by the lights from the cars would make reflections on the ceiling of my room, and I would fantasize that these light beams were taking me to some fantasy world where everything was wonderful. And it was a really, really good feeling, and I was in a happy place. And then I heard the car door slam, and those beams that were taking me to another world suddenly became hideous and scary objects, because with the slamming of the door meant that my father was coming home again. Growing up, my father had demons that he had to face on his own, and the way he faced them was turning to the bottle and becoming an alcoholic. And the way he dealt with his demons made him a demon to my sisters and myself. He was an abusive, angry, alcoholic man, and we never could do anything right. And I remember this night lying in my bed, hearing the car door slam, and wondering, should I pretend to be asleep or should I be awake? But there was no right answer. If I was sleeping, I was just an ungrateful, worthless kid who couldn't stay awake long enough to see his father when his father got home. And if I was awake, I was a troublemaker who wouldn't go to bed when he was supposed to. So there really was no winning, but this evening I decided that I was going to be asleep because I didn't want to have to hear him. And I hoped and prayed that he wouldn't wake me up to beat the man into me that I was supposed to become. I remember him stumbling up the stairs and coming into my bedroom, of course, waking me up and yelling at me because I was the ungrateful kid who couldn't stay awake to see his father come home. And I remember him telling me that I had to be careful because the Kitchener-Waterloo Strangler was on the loose, and he was crawling into young boys' bedrooms through the window at night and killing them because they were such rotten children. And after that, he went and he opened my bedroom window, turned off my bedroom light, closed my bedroom door and locked it behind him. I remember lying in my bed for what seemed to be an eternity. It was probably only a few seconds, but when you're a young kid, it seems like a long time. Terrified to move. But I wasn't terrified that the Kitchener-Waterloo Strangler was going to be coming into my room and killing me. I was more terrified that my father would come back and give me another beating. After I got the nerve up to move, I actually crawled from my bed over to the bedroom window and I looked outside. And there, standing under one of the streetlights, was a gentleman smoking a cigarette. And the only thing I could think of was, that's the Kitchener-Waterloo Strangler. So what did I do? I started waving at him. Hello, I'm over here, pick me. Because I knew that dying was better than the life that I was living. What a horrible thought for a young child under 5 to have. When I was 6, I was fortunate and I got run over by a car. I say I was fortunate because that took me out of the family house and put me into the hospital. My knee bone was broken in 6 places, and I was in traction for 6 months. And I remember a few things in the hospital. I remember being introduced to spinach, which I actually loved, to the amazement and pleasure of the nurses, because a kid with a broken bone eating spinach is a good thing. But I remember wanting everybody's spinach that was in my room, because nobody wanted to have their spinach. I was asking for more and more, which really made the nurses happy. I remember being taught how to walk again, because after my leg was up in traction so long, I lost the ability to walk. But my most vivid memory from being in the hospital was lying in bed one night, and I don't know if I was dreaming or if it was a vision. There's really no way to say exactly what happened. But I remember looking down to the end of my bed and seeing a lioness lying on my bed. And it didn't scare me. I felt a calm, strange peace. And the lioness spoke to me. And she said, "I'm sorry, I have to go. But you can do it. Remain strong. You can get through." And then she was gone. I started screaming and hollering, and the nurses came running down the hall trying to figure out what was wrong. And I told them that my mother had just died. They shook their head and said, "No, you just had a bad dream." The next morning, when my mother and father would normally be coming to visit me, I could hear one set of footsteps coming down the hallway. And my father appeared at the door of the hospital room, looked at me and said, "Your mother died last night. You have 5 minutes to cry, and after that you can never cry again, because real men don't cry." After my leg got better and I got released from the hospital, I didn't go back home to where my father was because he was an alcoholic and couldn't take care of us. But my 2 older sisters and I were adopted by a farm family, and my younger sister was adopted by a family in Toronto, and we've been separated ever since. So I moved on to the farm family, which had to be much better than the place that I'd been growing up in, with the abuse, the anger, the hurt, and the pain. But sadly, the farm family didn't just take us in out of love and compassion. They took us in because their children were growing up and they needed people to work on the farm. So I went from one horrible situation to another. Definitely not wanted, not loved, not cared about. I was there to provide a service for these people, and I was expected to obey all their rules and do everything the way they wanted things done. But something about me is, you can ask me to do something and it'll bend over backwards and try to accomplish that for you, but tell me to do something and it's going to be a challenge. And I guess growing up I was always a challenging child because I constantly got in trouble. I still have some scars and welts to prove that I was a horrible child. Every day I would be in school worried about what I was going to get in trouble for that night when I came home. And there were beatings and there was abuse, and it was just not a good experience for anybody to have to go through it. But through all of this though, my one sister was a year older than me, and we formed a very strong bond. And when things just got too tough to handle, we would go to our little hiding spot, and we would cry to each other, and we would tell each other our stories and share our pain with each other, so that we could continue to survive for yet another day. Things eventually got too rough on the farm for my sister, so she decided to run away. She didn't get far because she was just a young child, and the police were much more intelligent than a young child trying to run away from home. But she was caught and she was put into foster care. And shortly after, because I knew that she was running away and I had not told anybody she was running, I was deemed not worthy to live on the farm, and I was put into foster care for a 6-month trial basis. So, from one family to yet another, nobody wants to keep me around. So I'm in foster care for 6 months, and it's not a wonderful experience, but it's better than the physical abuse that I've been getting on the farm. And after the 6-month trial period, we went back to the courthouse to decide whether or not I was going to stay in care, or whether I had been fixed and I could go back and be a productive part of the farm family. And I didn't go into the room where all the decisions were made because I was just a young person and it was all about me that was going on in there, but of course my 2 cents didn't matter because I was just a young kid and what I felt didn't matter. I remember sitting in the hallway, and eventually my foster mom came out with my foster brother who had been in the room as well. And they took me and we went for Chinese dinner on the way home. And they said to me, they didn't bother showing up. So here's a young kid who's been taken from place to place, told repeatedly that he's worthless, useless, nobody's going to love him, nobody's going to care for him. I mean, yet another example of somebody who's been in charge of helping me learn and grow, just passing me off to the next person because I was not worthy, I was not good enough. Things in foster care, were somewhat better. I wasn't getting physically abused all the time, but there was lots of emotional and mental abuse. And it wasn't a very good time for me whatsoever. The Family and Children's Services back then was not nearly as good of an organization as it is now. And we could complain to our counselors through the agency and nothing would be done. Eventually, something happened in the foster home which caused a lot of trouble, and all the fingers were pointed at me, and I was the instigator and I was the one who started this, so therefore I wasn't worthy to stay at that foster home anymore. So FNCS tried placing me in various places, but again, I was broken and I was the screw up, so again, nobody wanted to keep me and I just couldn't fit in anywhere. But since I was crown board children, they couldn't just get rid of me, so what they did is they put me on independent living where they gave me a small token of money and said live, and gave me no support to do that. But all through my life, people had always told me, get your education because that's the most important thing, and if you don't have an education, you're not going to go anywhere in life. So I continued to go through high school. I worked full-time in the donut shop, midnight shifts, and went to school full-time during the day so I could get my education, because without your education, you're going nowhere. But all through everything that I'd gone through, I still had my sister who was my primary support. We still connected with each other and told each other our pain and shared our suffering. Finished high school, went to college, became a journalist, worked at the Cambridge Reporter for a month, and decided I hated that. So I went back to working survivor jobs, Tim Hortons, coffee shops, anything so I could have a roof over my head. And then when I was 23, the second worst event of my life happened. My sister was killed in a car accident. And she had been my primary support all of my life. And without her, I did not know how to live. I could not cope. And I had a huge emotional breakdown where I wouldn't get out of my room. I literally had to crawl to the bathroom when I went to the bathroom because I didn't eat. I just laid in bed and hoped that the God out there would take me so I could be with my sister again, because there really was no reason for me to be here. Eventually my friends got tired of me feeling sorry for myself, and they managed to point out things to me that made me realize that, okay, maybe I don't want to die. But, so I started going back to work and doing odd things here and there and trying to be a productive part of society. But with no belief in myself, I continued working at crappy jobs, which paid minimum wage. And things became challenging, more and more challenging. Expenses would go up, wages wouldn't go up. And soon I had to make the choice of where am I going to live, because I can't afford to keep a roof over my head and continue feeding myself. And I ended up living on the streets. Started in Kitchener, and I kept trying to move ahead, go forward again. But every time where I turned, I became a failure again, just like everyone had told me I was always going to be. So I decided maybe if I moved to a bigger city, there'll be more opportunities. So I jumped on the bus and I went to Hamilton and decided I was going to start my life there again. And again, I worked at survivor jobs. Expenses were much more than what wages were, and I realized again that, yes, I am this failure that everybody told me I am. So then I thought, well, maybe if I go to a bigger city, there'll be more opportunities. So I went to Toronto and decided that this is where I'm going to begin my life and things are going to start working for me. But with no direction in life, never being taught how to live, and in fact, spending every day of my life only surviving and not knowing how to live, I continued to fall into the hole of, look at me, I'm the failure that everybody's told me I am. I spent so much time fighting against being a failure that I never put any thought into becoming a success. And what you put out there in the universe is usually what the universe puts back to you. So my entire life I spent realizing that I was a failure and struggling not to be a failure, but failure was the only thing I could think of. And one morning I woke up and realized that I am this failure that everybody told me. So I decided I was going to hitchhike across the country to go to Calgary where I had been born, so I could see it once again before I died, because Calgary was going to be the place where I was going to kill myself. But you put your thoughts out to the universe, and sometimes the universe screams very loudly at you that this isn't what's going to happen in your life. So while I was homeless on the streets in Toronto, I kept running into many other people who were in the same predicament for whatever reasons of their own. And I saw the horrendous way that society was treating these people. And I realized this is not acceptable. And I started taking a stand. And I started recognizing that I have the ability to change people's lives. So I became an advocate for the people who were living on the streets with me. I still had no belief in myself, and I wasn't worthy of getting this help, but these were people who deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. Nobody knew the journeys that they had taken in their lives and what brought them to this point, and they did not deserve to be looked down on and treated with disdain and ignorance. They deserved to be treated with compassion and respect. So I spent most of my time on the streets in Toronto, helping other people who were on the streets to get their lives back together. And eventually people pointed out to me that you have this skill set, you have this ability, you can actually do something really, really beneficial for people. So start applying that to yourself. So I did start applying it to myself, and I started realizing that maybe I'm not this complete failure, and maybe I can do something. And I started believing that I can be a success rather than not just a failure. So I put that out into the universe. And one day I came across a job ad saying that one of the criteria was to be a survivor of the mental health system. And I thought, this is just so cool. Finally, my craziness is a requirement of a job rather than something that's going to keep me from getting a job. And I ended up getting a job, a very good paying job in Toronto, because of my skill sets and also because I'd been through the mental health system. And from there, I saw other people who had also been horrendously abused through the system, working together to create a better understanding of what life is about and to raise awareness so people in the general community can understand, just because somebody's different than you doesn't mean that they're not as good as you. And from that point on, I've been working in various social service agencies trying to educate the public, open their eyes, give them a different point of view of what life can actually be like. So I see people living on the streets who are dirty clothes, dirty nails, haven't bathed in who knows how long. But I also know their stories and their journeys, and I recognize that these are people as well, and some of the horrendous events that they have gone through, I'm surprised that they're still living. But I don't look at them as somebody who's living on the streets. I just look at them as somebody whose situation is a bit more difficult and they're facing more challenges than most of us have to. And I think one of the reasons that I enjoy coming and speaking to groups of people, especially high school students, is that you guys have the ability to have a huge impact on the community, which in turn will have a huge impact on the world. The teacher who gave me a ride here this morning was saying that there's a wide spectrum of students who come to the school, some who come from more affluent neighborhoods and some who come from the less affluent neighborhoods. And I think it's really great that there's an integration of those different classes of people, because it gives you an opportunity to see that you're all the same. Your skin might be a different color, you might come from a lower income, you might be lesbian, you might be gay, but you're still a person. And I implore each and every one of you to, rather than judge somebody and condemn them because they are different than you, try to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what in their life has brought them to this point. Have they grown up in an abusive family? Were they raped as a child? I have worked at one organization where one of the young men that I worked with, when he was 2 years old, his father used to inject him with heroin while he was sleeping. So his father and his father's friends could see what the reaction would be when he grows up. And he grew up to be a troubled teen. And so many organizations just looked at him like he was a troubled teen. And they didn't bother to look at the root of what the trouble was. Let's fix him rather than fix what the problem was. So each and every one of you has the ability to look past the masks that people put on every day and see the person behind it. Don't judge, don't condemn. Be open and receptive. I think one of the reasons that I've gone through all of the crap that I had to go through was so that I could come to places like this and let you know, people have horrendous journeys that they've been on. So don't judge them until you walk in their shoes. Be accepting of them, give them the respect and the dignity they deserve. And by respecting each other, you're going to make a huge impact on this planet. Thanks for taking the time to listen.